everybody. Welcome to another session of Techs on Video Calls Having Coffee. I got Ilia here from Netwrix with me today, and we're going to talk a little bit about security frameworks. Welcome, Ilia. How you doing?
I am doing very well. Hey, Andreas. Hey, everyone, and thanks for having me back on this chat.
Oh, it's been a long time coming. Cheers. Having a cup of coffee. Having a cup of coffee with me. I really appreciate you making the time. You know, I wanted to bring on the expert, of course, to talk about, today, hopefully we could talk about security frameworks. And, I think a lot of people have seen those out there, the NIST frameworks, the CIS 20s, and, a lot of those different frameworks that are out in the, on the internet and released by a lot of these governing bodies or, collective bodies, if you would. And I always come up with the statement, and I like to call it deception and desire. There's a lot of deception that goes into trying to follow these frameworks, and there's a lot of desire that ends up taking it over how we end up doing this. Now, I'll let you explain a little bit about what they are, and then I'll kind of go in and come in why I say what I say about it based on what I see in the industry and what I see coming to us on these frameworks. So,
all right. So, as a vendor, we work a lot with companies in very different stages of their security maturity. We have customers that are just starting to think about, what we do about security, and they don't have dedicated resources, and they basically have someone in IT take care about securing the infrastructure. On the other end of the spectrum, we have customers with more mature security teams that actually do much more in terms of risk management and planning and all of that. And so especially with the customers that are less mature in their security journey, we see that a lot of them are almost lost in the question of where do we start? What should we do first? Do we need this appliance or that tool or that software, or do we need to hire someone? And that's exactly where the frameworks come into the conversation, because a framework is a model, basically, and essentially, as any model, it tries to simplify the complex questions so that you can comprehend them and actually do something and follow the model there.
It's essentially a get started guide.
Well, the frameworks are different. Some of them are closer to this getting started, and CIS top 20 controls would be the good example of that. Like, if you don't do anything about security, if you don't know where to start, here are your safe bets, basically. You start on the top, and as you work your way through the list, you actually get more and more secure. And also, you learn the fundamentals of security as you go through the list. And so you are better prepared to kind of take in the next steps. Other frameworks like COBIT or NIST cybersecurity framework or others are, I would say, more operational frameworks, basically helping you to frame your activities and to put them all in the same context. So when you need to prioritize and make decisions on your next step or investment, and where do we which aspect of security do we hire next or invest in next? Do we need more incident responders versus should we do improvements to our vulnerability management program, things like that? So these frameworks allow you to kind of see everything in a wider context and say, oh, we probably are doing better on this side, and we probably have a bigger gap here, so we'll invest here to even it out. So some of those frameworks are more applicable in some of the situations. I would say it's not always for the beginners only. It's in many cases it is helpful throughout your kind of operational life of your security team.
As they mature, they follow through. There are more extensive lists and recommendations, frameworks that follow you through as your company matures or grows.
Absolutely, and then they almost all of them have different levels of depth. Like if you look at NIST cybersecurity framework, for example, it's probably on the top of it. It's probably the simplest thing in the world. It has the 5 functions that are easy to explain to anyone who does not have a technical background. And on this highest possible level, it talks about what are the functional areas where you need to put your efforts in to build your cybersecurity program. You've got identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. And those are the 5 functions. Anything that you do in cybersecurity will belong to one of those things. And on this highest possible level, I see a lot of people actually using that to communicate their security program and their needs to the executives, to the boards, to the owners. So those non-technical decision makers, so that they understand, like, hey, we've got a good kind of protection. We have invested in our antivirus and firewalls and whatnot, but we don't have a good detection in place, or we don't have a good vulnerability management in place, which would fall into identify piece, right? Or we don't have a good asset inventory, or whatever we need to invest in. And so we leave the gaps, and this is a great communication tool on that level. However, as you kind of drill deeper into this, there are categories within each of these functions. There are subcategories. There are mapped kind of controls to each of that. There is the whole different publication from NIST with the huge control catalog that you can leverage. So it's up to you how deep you want to go down that rabbit hole. There is the depth of knowledge and depth of expertise packaged into those frameworks, and you start on the top level with kind of understanding where you are against those frameworks, and then as you kind of go through the process, you can go deeper and deeper and build more and more into your practice. Actually,
we get a lot of these requests a lot of the time. Like like you said, the CIS 20 is a simple. If you're going to do anything, at least do this simple 20 first things, right? Walk through the process. You walk through that process. But a lot of the times we get requests for security work, and people are approaching us out of the gates, and they're saying, yeah, we don't really have any, or we have some security in place, but we'd like to do a penetration test. Okay. And I'm saying to myself, okay, well, what do you have? What do you this? And it's very sporadic what they have, and they haven't done obviously the CIS 20. And you're saying to yourself, well, why would you spend $5,000, $6,000, $10,000, $15,000 on a penetration test when you haven't even done step 1, where you know that you're penetrating all of your assets, or you're testing all of the assets that you have, right? It's very much missing the point of the exercise, right? So
absolutely. And if you look at the CIS top 20, they break it into 3 buckets as well. So they've got the basic controls. There are 6 of them, and that's what you start with. And rest assured, penetration testing is not part of that. You start with the software and hardware inventory. You start with understanding your privileged accounts. You start with vulnerability management program and basic monitoring and logging. So those are the core things. You need to know what you have. You need to know what is happening there. You need to have some sort of patching process, and that's where you go.
And this similar too is they'll call us and say, I want this, an endpoint encryption, or I want an endpoint this, or I want an endpoint that, but they haven't even done we don't even have a clear inventory. We don't even have a clear understanding. Once we get to deploying, we find out that there's not even a clear understanding of how many offices they have. the documentation isn't there, and it sounds, and these are very successful, very strong companies. It's not a core focus, and it's not a core business for people, right? And I'm not mocking them. We're laughing because it's common, and it's just something that gets forgotten, and it's not something that's thought about. But now with the threats of security, we're seeing this now getting catapulted to the forefront, and people are starting to pay attention. But talk to me a little bit more, because again, we're always trying to move people, from the reactive to the proactive. And could you just talk to me just a little bit about how this can really help a company become more proactive in their responses to a security outbreak or breach?
Yeah, absolutely. So to your point about one of the ways people deceive themselves is they approach these frameworks as something that they can take as a checklist almost and say, all right, I'll just mark all of the boxes here, and I'm going to be safe and secure. And that's not how the frameworks work. The frameworks basically give you this operational framework. They give you the tool that you can use for your process. And so as you kind of move from this checkbox compliance mindset, you start to look at these frameworks in terms of, all right, what can I do here? And all of the frameworks that I know start with, now what you have, assess the risks, assess the configurations, do the vulnerability scans, and know what data you care about, know what business processes you care about, map that to your assets, right? So that you can assess the impact. And this is how you get into this proactive mode, because now you have this way to prioritize your efforts, because you honestly, with the increase of sophistication of technology and the growth of the amounts of data, you cannot realistically protect everything. So you need to choose your battles. You need to prioritize your efforts. You cannot enable detailed monitoring on everything, because you'll get millions of events every hour, and no one is going to look at them. And so you are going to miss something that is really important. So you start with this kind of inventory, and you start with identifying your priorities, and this kind of pushes you to be more proactive in terms of how you think about security. And that's what all the frameworks do. And then if we look at let's say at NIST cybersecurity framework, because it, like I said, on the high level, it is the very simple thing, and really helps to communicate different aspects of cybersecurity. So you have identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. And in the simplest way, you can say that identify and protect is what you do before you get owned. And you do that in order to reduce the likelihood of that happening. So you identify what's important, you put the protective measures around that, so that the bad guys have fewer chances to actually get to those important assets or data or whatever you have there. And then the rest of it, detect, respond, and recover, is the number of activities that you do when they actually break in to reduce the impact of them breaking in. So you want to detect faster, before they actually do any harm. If they get through, whatever your protective measures are, if they are inside of your network, you want to detect them as soon as possible. You want to have the response plan so that you can contain the incident and respond to that. again, effectively to minimize or even prevent the damage. And then in case something bad actually happened, you need to recover from that incident. And something that I want to stress out here, it's not about backups and recovery only. It's not about kind of restoring the systems or recovering the data. It's about the business recovery, the operations recovery. What do you need to do in order to get all of your business processes back up and running, all of your knowledge workers out there actually working on the system, fulfilling their duties, making money for the company, or fulfilling the mission for the company if you are a nonprofit, because that's what you are there for. It's not just about the kind of restoring from the latest backup.
It's not just having your accounting files or your historical files or your HR files. It's about your assets, and your assets are, what are you delivering as a business? What makes you money? Those are your assets.
Exactly.
And are those up and functioning? If your customers are asking for access to your sales database, if your CRM needs to be functioning, if your inventory database needs to be functioning so that you can process sales, you need to be able to invoice, whatever that is, that needs to be functioning. And how quickly can you get that back up and running?
Exactly.
So, yeah, and that's where you need to identify your assets. And I appreciate, Ilia. This is where I think the transition for companies in comprehending, what really is my impact is, we don't want people living in fear, but we don't want people living in ignorance as well.
Oh yeah.
And again, that's where I don't, people are deceived. They say, well, I've got an antivirus, I'm fine. No, you're not. Chances are you don't even have antivirus on all your machines. Because
if you don't know what your machines are, how are you sure that all of them have antivirus?
And if you haven't gone down to the process where you have people verifying that, you don't even know if somebody's removed antivirus because they couldn't get something to load. So they uninstalled antivirus and they never reinstalled it because nobody's checking. So that's where you get into these processes, and that's where it's so important. So, Ilia, I was going to ask you for a commitment today, because we find that not everything in these, like you said, some of it's a framework, and some of it's a little bit of a checklist, but some of it's really like a guide, right? It's meant to guide you along the pathway. You're meant to walk along and learn as you're going and make decisions. So I find that very different for the SMB, maybe different for the SME, and obviously different for the enterprise. So if we were to look at those three companies, and maybe we were to take some scales and walk through some of those frameworks, do you think we could commit to doing a couple, 3 sessions of those, and walk through those different frameworks as sample guides?
Absolutely.
Show people how they can apply it, because it is a little overwhelming. And not everybody has access to somebody who can do it for them. But again, we'll try and keep it high level. We'll try not to get too technical or too in depth, but show some of the scenarios, and so that people can see the benefits of actually doing this in their business, and get some of that love, and realize that, hey, this isn't something to be afraid of. This is actually this is like brushing your teeth. This is a good thing.
Sure, absolutely. I think we can do this, and like you said, it will be a very different exercise depending on where you are as a company in your, but not only in size really, but the applicability of some of the controls or of some of the frameworks will really depend on a number of things, on your risk profile, on your risk appetite in some cases, on your maturity as a company in terms of cybersecurity, of course, on your industry, on your vertical, where you are, how much regulation you have, things like that will also impact you. So yeah, there are a lot of things to take into account here.
Over the next couple of weeks, what I'll do is I'll put together, we'll start off with the SMB, and we'll put together a sample company, and then we'll go with maybe a medium-sized company, and then maybe a larger company, and then we'll we'll put together a sample company, and we'll come up with some statistics, and then we'll apply, and we'll say what does apply, what doesn't, and we'll do maybe 3 different sessions, one for each, so that obviously it doesn't take a month of Sundays for us to where we run out of recording space trying to get all 3 into one. But that would be great. I really appreciate that, Ilia, and I think people really will learn a lot from it. So that is awesome. I appreciate it, sir. Have yourself a great day. Thank you for joining us again. And as usual, fantastic, and always great to learn.
Thank you, Andreas, and thanks for having me.
Thank you, sir. Talk to you soon.